after college and kind of my wild child days there, I left and went to Florida, and I found my way into the casting world. And that was beautiful. It was a beautiful segue. I did a lot of modeling. I did a lot of things. And the superficiality of it, because again, being able to see everybody's, what they're not saying and what they're actually up to, I can see it just like I can see the color of the shirt they're wearing. So it was cognitive dissonance for me. And my soul felt vapid. I felt like I was thirsting for something deeper. And eventually made my way out to California. And every time an ambulance would go by, I would just get this knowing, like, that you should do that. And I was so scared of it, though, because being a paramedic is no joke. It's literal life and death. And if you mess up, you can kill somebody. It's a big deal.
You had such an edgy life. You had so much courage and kind of grit, and strength that you had developed. I mean, in a sense, you're a tiny little thing. You're what, 5'1" or something?
5'1", small but mighty.
But
I'd get out of the ambulance and everybody be like, what is she doing?
But talk about that going into it and what it was like for you to ultimately not just go through the training and pass, but what happened when you start opening up again?
It was such a different world. I had never experienced the militaristic type environment. And so the firefighters, paramedics, SWAT, and a lot of law enforcement, we all are kind of training in the same curriculum. Obviously, the paramedics are the medical side, but it's a very intense training. And there's a lot of weeding out because think about it. It's literally, again, life or death, these extreme circumstances that we're being called to come in at people's worst moments. And so it takes a certain personality type. And it's just not for everybody, obviously, right? We're the people that run towards what all the normal people are running away from. So, there's something unique about us. But I think that we're type A. We tend to be typically quite like alpha or masculine, very independent thinkers, very autonomous, and we can handle a tremendous level of intensity and potency. So my upbringing, not being safe and having to kind of fend for myself most of my life actually prepped me perfectly for the 911 system, because I felt like a duck to water when I eventually got trained in and through. I went through the UCLA EMT program, and initially I was scared, but then I just kind of made a decision, like, you know what? No, like, I got some pushback from some of the guys, and I was like, you know what? No, like, I can do this. And so I just made up my mind and went through the program. And then I got my first assignment. I got assigned to training on an ambulance down in South Central Los Angeles. So we covered Compton, Inglewood, Hawthorne, Carson, and sometimes Watts, depending on the system. So it was extraordinarily busy system. And that's where I very first started.
Very, very stressful in terms of
violence, intensity, and just sheer call volume, because it was just relentless. There was no breaks, no stopping, no sleep for 24 hours. You're just on and you're moving.
Of all the places in the world you could have been.
I know, from South Dakota, like to South Central. I'm like, hi, little girl who sees colors and dead people. I'm like, hi.
So let's talk about then when your faculties really started opening up while you were on the job, and hop right into that part of your life.
Cool. So again, at this stage in my life, the energetic sensitivities were still nothing I wanted a part of. I was aware of them because once I got cleaned up, so I had gone through overdose, all that stuff, but eventually I cleaned myself up after hitting rock bottom. And so the stimulus came back, but I was just doing my best to ignore it. So once I got on the calls, what I had noticed was the energies just started working through me. So everything for me on a 911 call would be very matrix-like. Everything would slow down the second we would be arriving, and I would begin to expand. My energy would expand. If I was going on a death call, which I did a lot of, I would taste metal. That was my tell. And I would know 2 or 3 steps ahead what was going to happen. So I was getting a precognitive kind of data stream, if you will, and awareness that gave me a little bit of an edge. But at first, I didn't know anything about it and I didn't want anything to do with it. I was just trying to be good at my job and be able to, so I would come on scene and I would be able to feel one of my first, actually, it was my first CPR, was very traumatic to me because we'd already done a full day and I was just trying to sleep a couple hours before going home. We got called in the middle of the night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever. And it was the CPR. And all I remember was walking in and seeing the little girl and the dad in the corner and their eyes just locked onto my eyes. And I felt all of their energy and all of their terror come in. Mom had cardiac arrest, heart attack or stroke or whatever she had, and she went down. And so then starting to do CPR. So I was navigating the tremendous emotions of people on scene, plus the pressure of having to perform and do my very first CPR. It was so overwhelming and overstimulating to me. That was kind of a big test for me because I was like, yeah, I can't do this. This is too much. But I took a couple of days off and I did a lot of thought and kind of run. I went for a trail run and was kind of asking, for a sign to keep going. And I received that sign. And so I was like, okay, I'm in this. And so ultimately I was hugely closeted, wouldn't say anything about it, but I gently started to notice that it was coming in handy, like that it was being useful. It wasn't this energy, the stimulus, the visions or auditory, like sometimes I would just get an auditory, give this medication or do this. And so I would just have these knowings. And so I started to gently relax my fear of it, but I still wasn't willing to say anything about it out loud to the firefighters and SWAT guys,
Because you didn't want to be, again, isolated and thought of as different. I hope you're enjoying this video because if you are, there are dozens more like it on my site, all supported by people like you. So if you'd like to keep this work rolling in and join our community, just click on the Patreon button at reginameredith.com. That also gives you access to insider commentary, my live book club, and other live events with special guests. So join in. Thanks. So did it come in handy to the extent where you'd come upon a crash where there are multiple victims, for example, and you could see someone standing outside of their body, and we're going to talk about who they're surrounded by in these circumstances, and you could see they were leaving the body versus someone else who was hovering and could reconnect. Were you able to help in that way know where to focus your energy, or were there kind of other parameters?
Yes. So as a paramedic, we have very specific protocols that we have to follow, especially when it comes to CPR and declaration of death, when it comes to leaving bodies. We can't leave a body on the freeway, for instance. But if there was multiple, I would have the knowing of who was already transitioned. Right. So because I would see, imagine, so when a soul exits in a trauma, oftentimes they're standing there confused next to the body. So the body could be crumpled on the ground from a drive-by shooting, or it could be in a car trapped and pinned, or a fall and at the bottom of a canyon, and they're confused. So I would see the soul that looked just like the body, except it was translucent. I could see through it. And then telepathically, they could see that I could see them. And I don't know exactly why that is. I think it's the same as like how spirits know that mediums, right, can channel. And so they would be able to tell that I could see them. And so over time, I developed my own little protocol. And this was quiet. I never said anything out loud, but I would start communicating with the soul telepathically. You're dead. You left your body. You're in a car accident. We're going to do CPR. We're going to cut you out the car and take you to the hospital, blah, 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 to start to give them a sense of understanding of what was happening and going on. And so, yeah, it became a skill set over time, but initially I was very clumsy with it and still kind of scared, not understanding why I could see these things, and then not knowing what to do with it, because that's a whole lot of information to watch somebody die physically, but then to have to communicate with their spirit about that death. It was a lot for my little human brain to handle.
Let's talk about what happens, and we'll talk about different kinds. You went on many different calls. Some were a CPR type call where an older person's had a heart attack. Others were violent and quick. In the case when it's violent and quick like that, like a car accident or a gunshot wound or something, what is the scene normally like on a spiritual level?
Well, oftentimes trauma calls are intense. Obviously, if there's, bystanders, we have to secure the scene and handle the family. We got to secure the freeway or whatever it is that we're navigating and dealing with. So it's a high velocity, high octane scene in the physical reality. On the energetic plane, what I noticed in traumas was there was almost always an angel that came, a celestial being. And I believe that the reason was to help the soul begin to understand and come to terms with. So if you can imagine, if you've ever seen a car accident and driven by and looked at it, or, we've seen tons of just our media and what's out there right now, there's just so much death and violence. So there's just, imagine all of the chaos. And then there would all of a sudden, it would start like fireflies. It would start with this like little light, and then it would begin to take form and expand, and it would just be a magnificent, calm energy. And the angels that I saw, I never saw like wings. It was more just violet, cobalt, silver, white, light, just beautiful, calm, tranquil, and just love. And so they would come, and then the person who had just died, they would have a moment and eventually envelop, and then I would watch them disappear. So I know the person had crossed.
I think that should give comfort to people to understand when they see a car crash, because it's so shocking to our senses when you see a mangled car and the ambulance and people being taken away, to understand that there is a grace in this transition. Doesn't matter how it happens in life. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you might also want to consider joining Patreon, which allows me to keep all of this content free and available to everyone. And if you're looking for like-minded souls, you might also enjoy my online community called Our Neighborhood. Links to join are in the description.